Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, your host, Christian Harris. I'm delighted to be joined this week by Oliver Williams from Worknest. Oliver and I have a really interesting conversation, a lot of it around safety culture, but it's how to make safety everyone's business. So Worknest, who Oliver works for, have done some research surveying both decision makers and also employees around a variety of health and safety topics. So we dig into that and explore some of the results. We talk about some of the HSE statistics, particularly thinking about things like mental health. And then a lot of the discussion revolves around what we can do to drive a better safety culture. So how can we make companies less reactive, more proactive, and what really works there in terms of leadership, inspiration and such topics. Oliver has been in this safety field for about 15 years, although as he says himself, you wouldn't think so to look at him because he's got a baby face. Unfortunately, I don't, so good on for him for that. He's really passionate, as you'll hear, about people, and he's also got a strong interest in technology as well. And as well as being a regional sort of health and safety manager, he's also a product lead for health and safety for Worknest. I'm sure you'll enjoy this chat. Lots to dig into, some statistics, but also some anecdotes, personal experiences, and thoughts from both Oliver and I. Hope you enjoy it and see you on the other side. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Welcome to the podcast, Oliver.
Hi Chris, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We've had a bit of audio difficulties, but we've got it solved now, so I'm feeling good.
I hope so anyway.
Definitely. So we're going to talk about how to make health and safety everyone's business, which I think is a really interesting topic and something that you have recently presented about. And the basis of that were a couple of data points. So I thought we'd drive into those first. So I think the first one was a survey. Was that a survey that you guys did?
Yeah, so at Worknest, we went out and surveyed our clients, and we didn't just survey the employer, we surveyed the employees as well. And off the back of another data point, which was the HSE statistics, we kind of just married them up and then thought, right, what's it mean? Looked at some conclusions, and then, what can we do to help people really?
Yeah.
We went out when, the word COVID or hybrid working was quite a buzzword. So a lot of the statistics and questions were around that, how people were feeling as well. Yeah. And we saw some things that we were not quite scary, we weren't expecting. And then some things that, we did expect people to say that. We had an interesting one that's in... The employers feel that the safety standards were going to be maintained over the next 12 months. Well, about 37% of people said yes, and 37% of employees said yes. So there's a massive range of people who think it's going to go downhill after the pandemic, and as we roll out of it now, which you could say is quite disappointing, really.
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of key ones that I thought jumped out at me, but going back to what you said, there's some answers which are disappointing but unexpected, and some answers which are disappointing and expected. And you're right.
Yes,
it's always a bit of it's just one of those things, I suppose. But you're never going to get, unfortunately, 100% of people singing from the right side of the hymn sheet, are you? I suppose.
No, and I think we've always had that challenge in safety. Let's be honest. I always look at 1/3 of employers are really engaged in safety. They want to do what they need to do. And you've got another third that just do it because they have to. And then you've got that 1/3 who really don't want to do it or almost really against it. And that's been my experience over years. I'd like to think that's changed during this pandemic because people's viewpoints have changed. employees, everyone's got expecting more, aren't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've seen as well in the survey. A lot of organisations are switching to going above and beyond because they see the importance of people and have to look after those people, because it is a competitive market out there now for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that I've said this recently. It's the best time ever to be involved in safety and risk in many ways, because you've never had as much attention, you've never had as much influence, you've never had a better chance to get stuff done. So let's try and, as a group of people, let's try and grab hold of that and really, drive through continuous improvement over the next 12 to 24 months.
I think that's the big challenge now, is keeping that momentum and almost shifting. Let's be honest, a lot of businesses, every business has forked out extra resource, cash, money, time and effort on COVID. I think it's about now not seeing we can save that time and resources, but right, let's push that. There's something where we were juggling with before the pandemic, and it could be slips and trips, it could be new machinery and garden or additional training. I think that's the challenge now, is you've spent that money, let's keep it in the safety budget kind of thing.
Yeah. I do think that perception has changed as well, from the perspective of I guess two sides really. If you're an employee, and I think it's really interesting that you surveyed the employees, not just the decision makers. You have that expectation, heightened expectation now, that safety is going to continue to be important. And if that falls back, or if you perceive that that's falling back, I think that's going to lead to, particularly in the market where there's almost a bit of a undersupply of labour, shall we say? So the employees have got a bit more sway. I think that's going to lead to sort of retention issues and recruitment issues. And then I think that from a customer perspective as well, we, particularly with the younger generation who are more passionate about some of these big causes like the environment, safety, I think is hand in glove with all of those themes. And so I think if you're seen as not being a safe company, you're going to struggle to get customers as well. So I do think, as I say, it's we've got this wave that we can try and ride on the surfboard.
Definitely, and not to get political, so I won't do. But you can see that people are, they're looking at where products come from, who they interact with, and I think safety, environment, and all that comes into it now. I think everyone needs to be a bit more critical about where they get their products from as a consumer. And I think businesses are going to start to be a lot more careful about who they do business with. Obviously, we've got to do care to ensure we have safe contractors and subcontractors. I think the companies are going to have to start going a bit further than that and actually digging a bit deeper. Okay, you've got a policy, but does it work? And the thing is, not just ticking that box at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting when you say that about the customer as well, because we're all customers, aren't we, in our day-to-day life?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in many ways, you should look at your members of your team as a customer as well in some respects. Yeah. And I think that would be a good philosophy to have anyway.
And I think we paint. I paint quite a dark picture, but safety has improved over the years. It is improving.
I was going to ask you, because what would be your perception as to, if we'd asked these same questions, 5 years ago, do you think we'd be in a better place now, even irrespective of the pandemic?
I think the pandemic's helped to get us to a better position. I think safety has always been improving. That's my experience of it. I think this has accelerated it. No doubt, it's made it so on people's minds, and we could go on about what people know more about safety and risk assessments and guidance. And yes, social media interpretation sometimes is different to our professional interpretation, but it's on everyone's tip of their tongue now, isn't it? Everyone's more important about it. I think it's accelerated it. You could just see in the HSE statistics, it is getting better. I think the only thing that's worrying, this was increasing before the pandemic, is the increase in mental health stress, anxiety, those figures, they're not plateauing out at all yet. They're still on the increase, and have been way before the pandemic. And you could say it's maybe because we're all more familiar about that type of mental health, and we want to talk about it more. Maybe the pandemic has accelerated, or we just didn't know about it, and we were recording as well. There's a couple of analogies or considerations to take away. But that would be my only concern. And you can see all the other data is almost, it plateaus out and it goes up and down. I think that one is just it keeps going up, and it's how we as professionals now work with different departments, HR, well-being. It's all interlinked now, isn't
it? I certainly think that there's something to awareness on the people's ability or openness to talk about it. I think a lot of this stuff, it's always been there, but it's always been bottled up a lot, hasn't it? Particularly among men.
Yes.
And I do also think that, the pandemic, whoever you are, whatever you did during the pandemic, and I had, I've got a lovely wife and 2 lovely kids, and we live in a nice house. And actually, on the scale of a really bad time in lockdown and a really good time in lockdown, I'm probably much further towards a really good time. But even that, it was tough on me, just not being able to do stuff like go and see your friends, and so I think everybody's mental health, has suffered. So I think I can only see that continuing to rise for the foreseeable future anyway, because there'll be a lagging effect, won't there, of the pandemic, I guess.
Yeah, I was in a similar position, house, 2 kids, a dog, a wife, couldn't, you get to stay at home, great, but underneath the surface, kids get bored, you get bored, you miss your friends, you miss your family. Couldn't have had it any easier, but still it's never easy. And so I can imagine other individuals who are hit by not being able to work financially, that's going to have a massive impact. And some people haven't gone back to the roles they used to have previously. They're in new roles now, and maybe they're doing roles that they feel is less of them because they're more qualified, and that's going to have an impact on people. And you just look at people's productivity. If they're not feeling well from a mental health point of view, then they're not going to be as productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I talk about, I don't know if I've spoken to you about this before, but I talk about 4 Ps of being proactive in safety and risk, and it's protection is the first one. So if you can get people to feel protected, then that's a good place to be, because that drives performance, as you say. And if you get higher performance, you get more profit, and if you get profit, then you've got the power to do other things with, expand or charitable stuff or whatever. So I do think high performance, is something that is inextricably linked with mental health.
And it goes on to one of my passions, which is people. Without people, we have nothing really. I got a train to London the other week, about hundreds of people. I wouldn't be able to get on that train and get to London. And I think people are so important to every organisation. And like you said, I like your analogies of how we protect them, and it leads to performance and leads to everything else. And they are critical. And I think that's why any safety culture has to have the mindset. And I always try and talk to people like people are different, so your culture has to be different. You can't just pick a culture model off the shelf and go, right, let's do that. It doesn't work, does it?
No.
Any professional like me who says that is lying, let's be honest. It has to be molded, it has to be customized to your people and your organisation. That's the only way we're going to see improvements in safety.
Yeah. So one of the most fascinating questions that you asked in the survey was, what do you think best describes your organisation's health and safety culture? And there were 5 answers. I'll just give the quick headlines. I'll use the employee numbers rather than the decision maker numbers. So reactive was 36%, calculative was 23%, generative 15%, proactive 14%, and pathological 12%. Do you want to just run through what those categories mean, or perhaps some of the ones that are less obvious? So reactive, I think everybody gets, and proactive, everyone gets. But I mean, what did you mean by calculative and generative and pathological, out of interest?
So pathological, we look at it as it's seen as it's a waste of time. Nobody wants to do it. It's there. It's a burden almost, and it's really just, yeah. It's not. It's the dregs. It doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
And I've been to many places like that where people have literally, you feel like you're not wanted.
And that's a real, if you've got 12% of people feeling that, that's quite a big proportion, isn't it? In many ways, and that's quite a big challenge.
Yeah, that's a chunk of people. 12%. It's not a small amount of people who just feel like it's a waste of time, which is disappointing, really, because. No one wants to go to work and feel like their safety isn't important, because at the end of the day, you're just going to get hurt. You can hurt someone else, and just a snowball effect. And
do you think that's just from your experience? I know this wouldn't come out of the survey. Do you think that's people who, or what proportion of that is people who sort of just don't care? Because you're always going to get people that just don't care, or what do you think? Of that 12%, is it half or something that actually they probably do care themselves, but they just think that the organisation is not delivering?
So in all my time and experience, I always look back at investigations I've done to really see what behaviour people are, and for all I've done, there's always been a very small percentage of the accidents that someone went out of their way to hurt themselves or to hurt someone else. And I like to think that's a nice thing, really.
Yeah.
People don't usually want to hurt others or hurt themselves. So I would say there is a proportion of that who just feel like it's a total waste of time.
Yeah.
They don't like anyone or society almost. But everyone else, I think they've just been grinded down.
Yeah.
And they've just been turned, essentially. But that's why I always look back is my investigations, and there always, of all the ones I've done, there's been a very small number where people have gone out of their way, and even when you've looked at it, well, why have you done it? It wasn't because they were under pressure or supervisory issues. It was literally, I hate to say it, they weren't a very nice person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the best way to answer your question.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. What about?
There's always one or two in society, isn't there? Let's be honest.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I mean, I studied languages, and whenever I used to go to French and German specifically, whenever I would go to France or Germany, I'd come home and people would ask me, "Oh, so what are the people in France like, or what are the people in Germany like, or what are they like in the south of France or the north of France or whatever?" And it's like, well, they're just the same as people here. 99% of people are lovely, and there's a few less lovely people, and that's just human nature, I think.
Yeah, like some used to say, same thing about the Welsh. Really, what do people like North Wales like? Well, they just sound different from the people down South Wales. They either nice people or they're not nice people. And yeah, it's the same thing about culture as well in different countries.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what does generative mean then in terms of health and safety culture?
So we were looking at we were trying to split it up from generative and calculative. They're quite similar, really. Generative is more, it is embedded. They do it. They do think about it. And then calculative is more of a how can I explain? The systems in place, but it's very robotic. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not within their culture. It's just almost we got to do it this way. We won't be moved or changed, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, so it's kind of like the difference between maybe sort of calculative is maybe more towards reactive, and generative is more towards proactive.
Yeah, generative is more of a cultural proactive thing, and then that's why calculative is more reactive. Like I visited a manufacturer of trains before, and I would say they're very good safety culture. I would say it's more calculative than generative. So very rigorous systems in place. which you don't question.
Yeah.
They don't improve on, they don't get any worse, you just follow them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's in there, but be better from a people point of view, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, were you personally sort of surprised by the split between those 5 categories, or was that kind of what you expected?
I was disappointed by the 12% in pathological, but everything else, well, I was more disappointed as well. And with the reactive, I thought we'd have more proactive responses in that, which is disappointing. I thought we were doing better than that as a society. It's so easy to be so negative about all this, but it has gone better. It is getting better out there.
Yeah, I think. I mean, in my world, I would say, because people often ask me when I first meet somebody, and I explain what I do. Everybody gets the problem of slips and falls, right?
Yeah.
Everybody understands it, and then one of the questions that always comes up is, so a company's quite proactive about this, or is it more reactive and they wait until stuff happens? And sadly for me, in what I do, it is still much more reactive than proactive. So kind of that it rings true to me, but I can also see, based on conversations I've had on the podcast and events and with kind of other areas of safety and risk, that there is more proactivity. So yeah, it's I guess it's not as black or white, is it, necessarily?
No, and it's hard to tell now where we're going to end up. We want to convert those reactive to proactive, don't we? And that's the big challenge. Like I deal with a range of clients. Some who you're there because you need to be there to tick a box, or their insurance company almost insisted upon it. But there are then others who are looking for that kind of support. And that's great working with people like that, because then you get to be very dynamic in your approach, and you get to be dynamic helping that people and those organizations. I always keep harping back to every organization is different, so your approach is different, and I'm sure it's similar with your role as well. It's not just one size fits all. You need to look at the entire picture, don't you, at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what would you, how would you go about, let's say you had 10 clients and you had, 40% of them were in that more reactive space. Yeah. I mean, how would you go about trying to engage with them and trying to influence them to change, to shift, to be, they're not going to go from 100% reactive to 100% proactive, but just to get them moving in the right direction? What are the kind of some of the things that you would advocate?
So I hate to say it, the starting point is usually like a survey or a cultural review, and it doesn't have to be onerous, but it's about asking some questions to your employers and your employees and seeing how the results come out of that. I always look at then building a team that's going to support you from that organization, and I always like to take out the highest person, or the managing director or CEO, fill it with your managers, your supervisors, your employees. But it does obviously it needs to come from the top, because it needs resources, it needs power as well, doesn't it, to move forward. It's a difficult one to start from zero, or even worse is to start from a negative point of view. But the biggest thing for me is do what you see on the tin, because I've seen site managers tell people off, we're not wearing high-vis and hard hats and boots, and then at the end of the day, I saw the same the manager walk onto site, tell someone about the work the next day, and he changed out of all this stuff. And for me, that's like, well, that's almost a game over event, isn't it? You've lost now all credibility. So I think the biggest flaws I see in safety culture or any initiatives is that they fizzle out. Yeah. People lose interest. And so I think you have to plan for the long game. And then maybe it's not about having a big bang event to start it off. It's growing it year on year. And so it doesn't fizzle out. That's the biggest dangers I see places. I go back the next year and the posters are all faded or out of date, and it's like, oh, well, that fizzled out everything. So
I've got two analogies to share actually on that point, which I
Okay.
think is really good. So the first one is I'm involved. Well, I say I'm involved. I'm not even sure if it still exists, but I was involved with a group of safety and risk professionals in the leisure sector,
Yeah.
and you know, it was created, and there were quarterly meetings, and it was like, right, these are our priorities, and we're going to have working groups, and we're going to put out guidance, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. We're going to run a conference, and it started off, from 0 to 100, and then partly due to the pandemic, to be fair, but it's like kind of all fizzled off because we as a group decided, right, these are our biggest priorities. Those priorities were kind of dealt with in terms of the guidance and the research and things like that. And then it's like, well, where do you go from here? So I think sometimes there's that piece around doing things gradually. And the other thing I'd say is just what I've learnt over the years and what I'm always trying to implement in my business, which is just go for those 1% incremental, but consistent gains where you're changing a habit for the long term and you're making a long-term improvement, and not just trying to jump the next hurdle, but sort of inch up and towards it. And that seems to me to be a longer term solution.
And that's what I'm seeing, and that's the biggest risk is making those small incremental wins and gains. Some places can change overnight, but they've got massive resources behind them. Let's not kid ourselves. But if you're, say, normal, you've got 100 employees, you're a manufacturer, pretty small in the grand scheme of things, you're going to have to take it slow and change bit by bit. Obviously, if there's something dramatic, you have to change overnight. If you look at some of the cases like Alton Towers, they have to change things pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
But cultural change does need to take its time, and it can't fizzle out. Because it's like everyone joins the gym on a January, and then we see who's there at the end of January. And I think for safety, for any program really, I think you should be planning 12 months program. That's our program for 12 months. So everyone knows what's happening. And then 6 months in, you plan the next 6 months. So then everyone's got everything. You've planned it out. And if you can't think that far ahead, then you probably shouldn't start, in my opinion. You probably should take stock and think, but how do I fill this 12 months? Maybe I shouldn't be doing monthly newsletters. Maybe it should be actually quarterly, because I'm not going to have the content to fill it out. I've seen that as well. People dedicate, right, I'm going to do weekly newsletters, and then 4 weeks in, they run out of things to talk about, and then it loses its power then, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's very true.
It's taking a time and thinking about what's going to have the biggest impact over the long term. You'd like to think businesses are planning to last longer than 12 months. Yeah, I think so. So your safety culture program should really last as long as you think you're going to last as well.
Yeah. I think another big mindset that I always try to take, and I think is really relevant to this as well, is that done is better than perfect. So think about how many people have, started writing a book and never published a book, and they've got 80% of a book on their computer or in some file somewhere, and it's like, well, that's 80% of a book is zero book. And so take on, don't bite off more you can chew. You're better off, as you say, to do something quarterly and do it every quarter, and then it's a habit, and then it's formed and it's having an impact, rather than sort of aim for something that's in a perfect world you do it weekly, but if you can't do it, then don't do it.
It reminds me of a saying I use a lot, and I get told off for using it. It's that'll do. But I think it's quite a good thing to think about. It's not because I'm lazy in safety or in life. I go with that shelf, that'll do. It's up, isn't it? The books are on it. But it's almost having that balance where it's hard to know when you've done enough, isn't it? And like you said, get it done. Then we can evolve it. Then we can move along. So I do use that. That'll do a lot. And it's not a negative thing. I think it's positive.
Yeah.
Because you can get caught in a trap, I think, in safety. I've seen some risk assessments so detailed you could probably use them to land on the moon.
Yeah.
But they haven't communicated them because they're still writing them in the thing. It's by my nature, I'm sort of a bit of a perfectionist and a bit of a tinkerer, and so I find myself,
sitting there with a project and it's taking too long because I'm trying to get it, and I've had to really shift my mindset to get away from that and just think, well, look, it's better if it's out there helping people in some way or doing what it's supposed to do, because even if it's doing something at 7 out of 10, that's better than it sitting on my hard drive and doing 0.
And it's the same thing. I keep going back to fizzling out. There's no point having an amazing month with no accidents and everyone's engaged, and then everyone switches off. Nobody gains from that. You've got that small blip in the middle. So it's all about those gradual gains, like you described.
Yeah. So planning ahead is one of the things you talked about, and the other thing I thought was really interesting was getting the managers involved, and I guess that's about the whole discussion around work as imagined versus work as done, and actually people on the shop floor know what's really happening, so get them engaged, because that's how you're going to drive change. Is that part of it, or is it mostly actually just that people are going to respect and follow leaders that are kind of more on their level than people that are sort of far removed up in the boardroom?
I think it's a bit of both, really, because we always talk about leaders and they must do this, and I think the perception, not always, but a lot of the time, is a leader has to be managing director, has to be even a supervisor or someone above you, but it can be your peers at the end of the day. As long as that, for me, as long as they have those qualities, you respect them, they always want to help you. There's that word critical friend, there's that silver lining rather than the critic. So for me, a leader can be for anywhere in the organization, and that's what we should be trying to instill in people. Obviously, it has to come from the top as well. I know I just said it shouldn't, but it has to come from the top. That's where the money comes from. Let's not kid ourselves. We have to have the organizational leaders involved, which are right at the top. But for me, their biggest role is doing what it says on the tin. We're going to do this, so we're going to do it. And I think it's about having the conviction as well. At the middle management level is sometimes where you lose the traction. So you can have a really engaged managing director. Underneath the middle managers, they're fine. But if you've got a stickler of a middle manager who just wants production, I've seen it fail there as well. So there has to be a lot of interaction and understanding there.
I see that quite a lot. I talk about silos, and obviously people are familiar with the silo from the perspective of a silo between departments, so like a horizontal silo. But I see a lot of what I call vertical silos, where the board will be saying one thing, and the board actually might, in their heart of hearts, be proactive and wanting to get stuff done. But then, as you say, there's this kind of, as you get through the organisation, you kind of end up at this point where there are some blockers and some people who are maybe more calculative or reactive, and then it doesn't marry up, and so you've got to try and break through that somehow.
And that's where you see employees disengaging then, because their supervisor is saying one thing, their managing director is saying another. So there has to be quite an open and honest review and looking at themselves, and it's dealing with those employees and then praising the ones or the middle managers who are doing it right. Who, what does great look like? It's almost saying that I like that one as well. What does great look like for this team, for this department? And almost saying this is what we like. And I gotta be honest, a lot of middle managers you meet, then they've never really wanted to manage people. They were good at their job, and then they've been given the management role. So sometimes training for those people is so important, and it could be softer skills. Now, they're not directly related to safety and culture, but if you've got people who can talk differently to people with those softer skills, they can get people on board. They can be give critical feedback rather than being negative and stuff like that. And it's a big difference, I think, sometimes.
You're spot on about the people that become managers are maybe not the best suited to be managers. I mean, I always think of sales, for example. Your best salesperson is probably your worst sales manager. But what often happens is they're the best salesperson, so they, so people want to promote them, and then they become a really bad sales manager, whereas actually they were really good at sales. And it's two very different skill sets, isn't it? Doing a job and then managing other people doing that job. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I'm a father, and my brother, he's an uncle and he's not a father. And he was telling me, we visited him last year, and he was saying, it's easy being an uncle. I don't think I could be a father. And it's almost the same thing with management and employees, isn't it?
Yeah.
As an uncle, you just get to have all the fun things. As a father, you've got to do the fun things and you've got to do the bad things. And as a manager and leader, you can't always be nice. And but I think the way you speak to people and how you talk, and even just the words you use, makes such a difference to the outcome. I try to talk to people at their level. So if I'm talking to, for example, an excavator driver, I'm not going to start talking about them ins and out of the health and safety policy.
No.
He doesn't know. It's almost the first question is, what are you doing today? How do you keep yourself safe? Yeah. And then you get your answers. But if you can see some people just going, have you read your risk assessment? What about this? Well, it's just, let's take it back a step and actually think about the human we're talking to now, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, going back to something I said earlier about it's never been a better time to be in this role.
Yeah.
I think actually that the skill set that you develop, partly because of that piece that you have to engage with everybody from the CEO to the cleaner and everyone in between, and the overall view you get of the business and how it works and what makes it tick. And I just think actually that safety and risk professionals, should be graduating into being the MDs and the CEOs of the future, in my opinion.
I'm with you on that one. And a good safety person can talk to people. When I talk to people who are starting off in safety, I know it sounds silly, but I tell people, just be yourself. Don't be that person who goes in and just reads off a checklist or reads off the regulations. For me, if you start quoting the regulations, I think you've lost already.
Yeah. I
would disengage if you were speaking to me. It's about it's about how you speak to people, isn't it? I think it's an art that's gone away over the years. I can't see it getting any better. But yeah, I think it's a dead art, really.
Yeah, definitely. Good stuff. Well, before we wrap it up, do you want to just give us a quick overview of Worknest and kind of how you guys could help with this kind of challenge or other challenges? And then I don't know if you want to put any plugs into any articles, or just go to the website or connect on LinkedIn or whatever it is.
Yeah, nothing too salesy, because I'm definitely not a salesperson. I'm all safety. But yeah, if you'd like to visit our website, worknest.com, and you can speak to one of our team and just look at the range of services we can promote. We do a lot of culture surveys, and we provide ultimate and it's fixed fee support. So yeah, just take a look at our website, and if I can help, or if you want a conversation informally, then speak to me on LinkedIn, and be more than happy to speak to anyone with some informal advice. I think it's quite important. I do it quite regularly to speak to people in this profession. Sometimes you can get a bit lost, can't you, in it all, really, isn't it? And sometimes all you need is a 10-minute conversation. You find yourself back on track.
Absolutely, and that goes for the point about mental health we were talking about earlier as well. It's just sometimes good to can't see the wood for the trees, and getting that external jolt of talking through something with someone else can give you a lot of clarity often.
Exactly, and thanks, Chris, for the opportunity, and look forward to doing one soon with you again.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much, Oliver, and thanks everybody for joining us today. If you enjoyed this, I'm sure you will enjoy next week's episode, but also I'd like to invite you to sign up for one of the weekly safety roundtables that I'm going to be hosting starting on the 23rd of March, and you can check out safetyroundtable.co.uk for all the details. See you again next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.